February 1959. 9 experienced hikers cut their way out of their tent from the inside and flee into the frozen Siberian wilderness in their underwear. They scatter in different directions through -30-degree temperatures. Within hours, all 9 are dead. But here's what makes this a nightmare that still haunts investigators 65 years later. Some bodies show massive internal trauma consistent with car crashes. Others have missing eyes and tongues. Several are contaminated with radiation. The tent was found sliced open from the inside, as if they were desperately trying to escape something. The Soviet government classified the investigation and sealed the case files for decades. When they finally reopened the case in 2019, their official explanation satisfied no one and raised even more disturbing questions. The Dyatlov Pass incident is the deadliest unsolved mystery in mountaineering history. 9 deaths with evidence so bizarre that every explanation seems impossible. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this case has spawned countless conspiracy theories, why the latest scientific explanation is somehow more terrifying than supernatural theories, and why the Russian government may still be hiding crucial evidence. But first, if cold case mysteries involving government cover-ups and impossible deaths fascinate you, hit that subscribe button. This journey into the frozen Urals will chill you to your core. January 23, 1959. 10 young Soviet students and recent graduates gather at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, preparing for an ambitious winter expedition into the northern Ural Mountains. The group is led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an experienced hiker and radio engineering student. His team includes 7 men and 2 women, all skilled cross-country skiers and outdoor enthusiasts. This isn't a group of amateurs. Several members hold Grade 2 certifications, the highest mountaineering qualification in the Soviet Union. Their plan: a 190-mile ski trek to Otorten Mountain, a route considered Category 3 difficulty, the most challenging classification. The expedition is designed to qualify the team for more prestigious mountaineering certifications. On January 27th, the group boards a train, then a truck, reaching the last inhabited settlement of Vizhay on January 27th. From there, they begin skiing north into the wilderness. The early days of the expedition are routine. Dyatlov keeps a detailed diary. Team members take photographs showing them skiing through forests, setting up camps, joking and smiling. Everything appears normal on January 28th. One team member, Yuri Yudin, develops severe back pain and joint problems. He makes the decision to turn back, a choice that will save his life and haunt him forever. The remaining 9 continue north: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kalmogorova, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Rustam Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonischenko, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, and Semyon Zolotaryov. On February 1st, the group reaches the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name in the indigenous Mansi language translates to Dead Mountain. They pitch their tent on the exposed slope, despite being only about a mile from the tree line where they would have been sheltered from the wind. Dyatlov later wrote in his diary that he wanted to gain experience camping on exposed mountain slopes. That evening is the last time anyone sees them alive. Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram to their sports club upon returning to Vizhay, expected around February 12th. When the telegram doesn't arrive, no one is initially concerned. Delays of a few days were common on such expeditions. But as days turn into weeks with no word, families grow worried. On February 20th, rescue teams are finally dispatched. What they're about to discover will become one of history's most baffling mysteries. If you're already feeling the dread building, show some love with a like. The nightmare is just beginning. February 26, 1959. Search and rescue teams finally locate the Dyatlov group's tent on the slopes of Koletsyakal. What they find is a scene so disturbing that it defies rational explanation. The tent is partially collapsed, covered in snow but still standing. As the rescuers approach, they notice something immediately wrong. The tent has been sliced open from the inside. Multiple cuts, clearly made by knives wielded from within, as if the occupants were desperately trying to escape. But escape from what? The rescuers examine the surrounding area. There are no signs of an attack, no animal tracks, no evidence of an avalanche that would have buried them. Just footprints leading away from the tent down the slope toward the tree line. The footprints tell a chilling story. 8 or 9 sets of prints, some barefoot, some in socks, some in a single boot heading down the mountain in an orderly line. Not running in panic, but walking deliberately. In -30-degree temperatures, wearing almost no clothing. Inside the abandoned tent, investigators find everything you'd expect from experienced hikers. Boots, warm clothing, food, equipment. All abandoned. Whatever made them flee was so terrifying that they chose certain death by exposure over staying in their tent. On February 27th, rescuers find the first 2 bodies near the tree line, about a mile from the tent. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko are found beneath a large cedar tree, dressed only in underwear. They're both dead from hypothermia. But there are strange details. The cedar tree shows signs that someone had climbed 15 feet up and broken off branches, perhaps trying to see back toward the tent, or looking for something in the darkness. Both bodies have burned hands and burned clothing, suggesting they had built a fire. Between the cedar tree and the tent, search teams discover 3 more bodies over the following days. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kalmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. All 3 are positioned as if they were trying to return to the tent. All 3 died of hypothermia. But Slobodin has a mysterious skull fracture, not severe enough to kill him, but significant. How did he get it? 4 team members remain missing. The search continues through March and into April. On May 4th, nearly 3 months after the incident, the final 4 bodies are found in a ravine about 250 feet from the cedar tree, buried under 12 feet of snow. This is where the mystery becomes a nightmare. These 4 bodies, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, and Semyon Zolotaryov, show massive internal injuries that cannot be explained by hypothermia or exposure. Dubinina and Zolotaryov have major chest fractures, multiple broken ribs with massive internal trauma. Thibault-Brignoles has severe skull damage. The medical examiner notes that the force required to cause these injuries is comparable to a car crash. Yet there are no external wounds, no bruising, no soft tissue damage, just catastrophic internal trauma, as if they had been subjected to extreme pressure or force. Dubinina is found with her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips missing. Some of the bodies are found wearing clothes that had been cut from the bodies of those who died first, suggesting the survivors tried to keep warm using their dead friends' clothing. And then there's the radiation. Clothing from some of the bodies tests positive for elevated radiation levels, though the Soviet authorities provide no explanation. The Soviet authorities launch a criminal investigation, but from the beginning, their approach seems designed to suppress information rather than discover truth. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, examines the scene and interviews witnesses. His preliminary findings raise more questions than answers. The autopsy reports are bizarre. The medical examiner, Boris Vozrozdeny, concludes that 6 victims died of hypothermia. The other 3 died of physical trauma so severe it would normally be associated with high-speed impacts or explosions. But Vozrozdeny finds no external injuries consistent with such trauma. The damage is all internal: crushed ribs, massive internal bleeding, skull fractures without the cuts, bruises, or broken skin you'd expect from such violent force. When clothing from several bodies tests positive for radiation, the authorities provide no explanation. They simply note it in the reports and move on. No investigation into the source. No attempt to explain why experienced hikers would be contaminated with radioactive material. Search and rescue team members report strange observations. Several witnesses describe seeing bright orange spheres or lights in the sky around the time of the incident. Others report similar lights in the weeks following the deaths. Mansi indigenous people living in the region tell investigators about strange military activity in the area around the time of the incident. There are reports of unusual aircraft, loud booms, and restricted military zones. But when Ivanov tries to investigate these leads, he encounters resistance from higher authorities. On May 28, 1959, just weeks after the final bodies are discovered, the investigation is abruptly closed. The official conclusion is vague to the point of meaninglessness. The deaths were caused by a compelling unknown force. Not an avalanche. Not an attack. Not an accident. A compelling unknown force. The case files are immediately classified and sealed. Years later, Ivanov would reveal that he had been ordered to close the investigation by Soviet authorities, who told him the incident involved secret weapon tests, but provided no further details. Here's what I find most suspicious. The Soviet government, known for extensive bureaucracy and detailed investigations, suddenly closes a case involving 9 deaths with essentially no explanation. What were they hiding? Drop your theories in the comments. The Dyatlov Group's cameras and diaries are confiscated. Some photographs are missing from the rolls of film. The last photograph on one camera shows nothing but darkness, as if someone had taken a final photo in the moments before disaster. Several frames on the recovered film are missing or damaged. Were they removed? Did they show something the authorities wanted hidden? The area around Kolotsyakhl is declared off-limits for 3 years following the incident. No official explanation is given for this restriction. For over 60 years, the Dyatlov Pass incident has spawned countless theories attempting to explain what killed 9 experienced hikers in one of history's most baffling mysteries. Theory 1. Military weapons testing. The most persistent theory involves secret Soviet military tests. The Ural region was home to numerous classified military facilities during the Cold War, including nuclear weapons research and missile testing sites. Supporters point to the radiation on clothing, the strange lights witnessed by locals, the military's quick response to close the area, and Ivanov's later admission that authorities mentioned weapon tests. Could the hikers have accidentally witnessed a classified military test? Were they killed by experimental weapons, perhaps thermobaric explosives or sonic weapons that could cause internal injuries without external wounds? The problem with this theory is that it doesn't explain why the hikers fled their tent in terror. If they were hit by a surprise weapon attack, they would have died in or near the tent, not a mile away after fleeing into the wilderness. Theory 2. Infrasound. In the 1990s, researchers proposed that infrasound, sound waves below the threshold of human hearing, might have caused the incident. Certain wind conditions in mountain passes can create infrasound at frequencies that cause feelings of dread, panic, nausea, and even hallucinations in humans. The hikers might have been affected by infrasound, causing them to flee in irrational panic. But infrasound doesn't explain the massive internal injuries found on some bodies or the missing tongue and eyes. Theory 3. Paradoxical undressing. Some researchers suggest the hikers suffered from acute hypothermia, which can cause paradoxical undressing, a phenomenon where severely hypothermic victims feel hot and remove their clothing. This is a real medical phenomenon that explains why some victims were found partially clothed. But it doesn't explain why they left the tent in the first place, or the severe internal injuries, or the radiation, or the missing tongue and eyes. Theory 4. Katabatic winds are powerful downslope winds that can reach extreme speeds. Some theorize that such a wind hit the tent with tremendous force, damaging it and terrifying the occupants into fleeing. This explains the initial flight but not the subsequent injuries or the methodical cutting of the tent from inside. Theory 5. Mansi attack. Some early theories suggested the indigenous Mansi people attacked the hikers for trespassing on sacred land. However, the Mansi have no history of violence against hikers, and the injuries don't match weapons they would have used. This theory has been thoroughly discredited. Theory 6. Yeti or unknown creature. Inevitably, some theories invoke unknown creatures or Yeti attacks. These theories have no evidential support and exist primarily in tabloid coverage and conspiracy websites. Theory 7. Government cover-up. Perhaps the most persistent theory is that the Soviet government knows exactly what happened but covered it up for political or military reasons. The quick closure of the investigation, the classification of files, and the restricted area all suggest official suppression of information. In 2019, facing renewed pressure from the victims' families and public interest, the Russian government reopened the Dyatlov Pass investigation, the first official inquiry in 60 years. The investigation was led by the Russian Prosecutor General's office and included modern forensic analysis, computer simulations, and expert consultations. In July 2020, authorities announced their official conclusion. The deaths were caused by an avalanche. Wait, an avalanche? After 60 years of mystery, that's the explanation? But there was no evidence of an avalanche at the scene. Rescuers in 1959 saw no signs of snow displacement. The tent was still standing. How could this be right? The investigation hired Swiss and Russian avalanche experts who created computer simulations of the mountainside. They concluded that a rare type of avalanche, a delayed slab avalanche, could have hit the tent hours after it was pitched. According to this theory, the hikers cut into the slope to create a flat platform for their tent. This destabilized the snow above them. Hours later, while they slept, a relatively small slab avalanche, not a full avalanche, hit the tent with tremendous force, causing the internal injuries to some victims. Panicking in the darkness and cold, possibly with some members injured and disoriented, the group made the fatal decision to flee down the mountain rather than stay with potentially damaged shelter. Modern forensic analysis suggests the chest injuries could have been caused by compressive force from snow, not from an impact or explosion. The skull fractures could have been caused by falls in the darkness during the panicked flight. But this explanation has significant problems. If an avalanche hit the tent, why was it still standing when rescuers arrived? Why did the hikers cut their way out from inside rather than being buried? Why did they flee a mile away rather than simply moving their tent? Most importantly, why did the Soviet government classify this case for decades if it was just an avalanche? What made this incident require 60 years of secrecy? Share your thoughts in the comments. Does the official explanation satisfy you? Or is something still being hidden? The 2020 avalanche conclusion sparked intense scientific debate, with many experts rejecting the official explanation and proposing alternatives based on modern research. The Kármán vortex theory. In 2021, two scientists published a paper in Communications Earth and Environment proposing a different explanation involving aerodynamic phenomena. When wind flows over mountain peaks, it can create vortices, rotating columns of air that can generate powerful downward forces. Under specific conditions, these vortices can produce tremendous localized pressure that could explain both the tent damage and internal injuries. The scientists calculated that the specific shape of Kolet's cycle could create unusual wind patterns that might explain why the hikers fled the tent, not from fear, but because the tent was being destroyed by extreme wind pressure. The hypothermia cascade theory. Medical researchers have proposed that the entire sequence of events can be explained by cascading hypothermia effects combined with poor decision-making in extreme conditions. Something damages or threatens the tent, wind, minor avalanche, equipment failure. The group makes a poor decision to abandon the tent rather than repair it. They plan to shelter in the forest and return for equipment in daylight. Hypothermia sets in faster than expected due to extreme cold. Hypothermia causes confusion, paradoxical undressing, and fatal mistakes. Some victims fall into the ravine in the darkness, Causing traumatic injuries, the missing tongue and eyes are explained by post-mortem animal scavenging. Modern analysis suggests the radiation detected on clothing may have been from naturally occurring radioactive materials in the region, or from contamination during the autopsy and investigation process. The 1959 detection methods were crude by modern standards. The military involvement theory. Despite official denials, many researchers continue to believe military activity played a role. New evidence has emerged supporting this. Declassified Soviet documents reveal that the military was indeed conducting tests in the Ural region in early 1959. While the specific nature of these tests remains classified, we know they involved rockets and possibly experimental weapons. Local residents have reported that they were warned to stay indoors on certain nights due to military exercises, warnings that were issued around the time of the Dyatlov incident. Semyon Zolotaryov, one of the victims, was significantly older than the others, 37 years old, and joined the expedition at the last minute. His background includes military service, and some records suggest he may have had intelligence connections. Was he on the trip for reasons beyond hiking? The infrasound panic theory. Recent research into infrasound effects has revived this theory with new scientific support. Studies have shown that infrasound at certain frequencies can cause extreme psychological effects: panic, dread, hallucinations, and disorientation. Wind patterns in the Urals could generate such frequencies under specific conditions. The theory suggests that infrasound caused mass panic, leading the group to flee irrationally into the wilderness. The injuries and other evidence could then be explained by falls, hypothermia, and the chaotic aftermath of their flight. Regardless of which theory you believe, there are pieces of evidence from the Dyatlov Pass incident that don't fit cleanly into any explanation, disturbing details that suggest we still don't know the full story. The missing photographs. The hikers carried multiple cameras and took numerous photographs throughout their journey, but several frames are mysteriously missing from the recovered film. One camera shows a peculiar sequence: normal photographs, then several blank or severely overexposed frames, then nothing. What was on those missing frames? Were they removed by Soviet investigators? Or did the hikers themselves take photographs of something so disturbing that the film was damaged or destroyed? Lyudmila Dubinina's missing tongue while scavenging animals are the usual explanation for the missing tongue and eyes. Forensic experts note something odd. The removal appears to have occurred before significant decomposition. The tissue damage suggests the tongue was removed relatively soon after death. Some researchers argue that the tongue's removal is inconsistent with typical animal scavenging patterns. Was it removed by something else? Or are there extreme scavengers in the Ural wilderness we don't understand? The radioactive clothing. Several items of clothing tested positive for radiation levels above normal background levels. While the 2020 investigation dismissed this as measurement error or contamination, the original tests were conducted by qualified Soviet nuclear scientists using proper protocols. If the radiation was real, where did it come from? The hikers worked at a nuclear research facility, but they hadn't been there for weeks before the trip. Did they encounter something radioactive in the mountains? The orange spheres. Multiple witnesses, including search and rescue teams, reported seeing bright orange spheres or lights in the sky around the time and location of the incident. These reports come from credible witnesses with no apparent reason to fabricate stories. The lights were reported not just at Dyatlov Pass, but across the Ural region in early 1959. Soviet military documents confirm unusual aerial phenomena were observed but provide no explanation. Were these military tests, natural phenomena, or something else? The tense position. Experienced mountaineers have pointed out that the location where the Dyatlov group pitched their tent makes no sense. They were only about a mile from the tree line, where they could have camped with natural wind protection. Why would experienced hikers deliberately camp on an exposed slope in extreme conditions? Dyatlov wrote that he wanted experience on exposed slopes, but this decision seems so obviously dangerous that some researchers wonder if they had another reason for camping there. Were they meeting someone? Observing something? Or did they simply make a fatal error in judgment? The methodical retreat. The footprints leading from the tent down to the tree line show ordered, purposeful walking, not panicked running. This contradicts the idea that they fled in terror from an avalanche or sudden threat. If they weren't running from immediate danger, why did they leave without proper clothing? If they were fleeing in panic, Why do the footprints show organized movement? Yuri Yudin's later statements, the sole survivor, Yuri Yudin, who turned back before the incident, spent decades giving interviews about the incident. In his later years, he made several cryptic statements suggesting he believed the Soviet government knew more than they revealed. Before his death in 2013, Yudin stated, "I knew them all very well. I knew that they would never panic and would never abandon their tent like that unless something extraordinary happened." He refused to accept the avalanche theory. After 65 years of investigation, speculation, and controversy, we must confront an uncomfortable possibility. We may never know the complete truth about what happened at Dyatlov Pass. The Soviet government had 60 years to destroy, classify, or alter evidence. Witnesses have died. Physical evidence has degraded. The cold, harsh environment of the Ural Mountains has long since erased most traces of what occurred that February night. What we know for certain is this: 9 experienced hikers died in circumstances so unusual that every proposed explanation has significant problems. Something happened on Dead Mountain that night that drove them from their tent into fatal conditions. The most scientifically credible explanation remains some combination of natural phenomena. Perhaps a small avalanche or extreme wind event combined with poor decisions under stress, cascading hypothermia, and tragic accidents in the darkness. But this explanation requires us to dismiss or explain away too many strange details. The radiation, the lights, the military activity, the government cover-up, the missing photographs, the specific pattern of injuries. The alternative is that something else happened, something involving military testing, classified weapons, or events that the Soviet/Russian government has suppressed for over 6 decades. That if this is true, the 2020 investigation was not a search for truth, but a final attempt to close the case with a plausible natural explanation that allows the real story to remain hidden forever. Perhaps the Dyatlov Pass incident teaches us something profound about the limits of certainty. Some mysteries may be fundamentally unsolvable, not because we lack intelligence or technology, but because the evidence has been deliberately obscured or irrecoverably lost. 9 people died knowing what killed them, but they took that knowledge to their graves, leaving behind only a scattered trail of evidence, contradictory clues, and a tent sliced open from the inside. Whatever they saw or experienced on Dead Mountain that night was terrifying enough to make experienced mountaineers choose certain death by exposure over staying in their shelter. That level of terror, whatever caused it, is something we may never truly understand. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains not just a mystery, but a monument to how much we still don't know about the world, and how easily truth can be lost when those in power decide it should be hidden. The Dyatlov Pass incident stands as one of history's most compelling unsolved mysteries. 9 deaths that have generated thousands of theories, but no definitive answer that explains all the evidence. Was it an avalanche? Infrasound? Military testing? A combination of natural phenomena and human error? Or something else entirely that remains classified in Russian government archives? The truth is that after 65 years, we may be no closer to understanding what really happened on Dead Mountain than the Soviet investigators who closed the case in 1959 with the admission that they didn't know. But perhaps that's what makes the Dyatlov Pass incident so enduringly fascinating. It reminds us that despite all our technology, science, and investigation techniques, some mysteries resist solution. Some secrets die with those who experienced them. And some truths may be deliberately hidden by those who prefer we never know. 9 people went into the Ural Mountains in 1959. None of them came back, and the mountain keeps its secrets. If this deep dive into one of history's most baffling cold cases has left you with more questions than answers, smash that like button and subscribe for more unsolved mysteries that challenge everything we think we know. And here's my question for you. What do you think really happened at Dyatlov Pass? Natural disaster, military cover-up, or something else entirely? Share your theory in the comments below, and if you can explain all the evidence with a single theory, you might solve what investigators couldn't crack for 65 years. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, some mountains earn their names. Dead Mountain keeps its secrets buried in snow and ice, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover them.